With only a solitary loss this season so far, and that too at Anfield against Liverpool, Newcastle are where not a lot of teams expected them to be, in the Premier League top 4. With a sparkling display of vigor and courage against Manchester City to achieve a final scoreline of 3-3 in August, some people thought that Newcastle would do good. But this good? Not a single club undergoes such a massive transformation without a whole host of things going their way. One of the biggest of them is an investment. After Saudi Arabia's public investment fund, RB Sports and Media and PCP Capital Partners took charge of the ownership of the club, it allowed quality players such as Kieran Trippier, Dan Burn, Bruno Guimaraes, and Chris Wood to join. But buying players alone isn't what keeps a club ticking. The manager also plays an equally important, if not more important part, and that's where Eddie Howe kicks in. With a focus on developing a certain type of play that made him such a revered figure when he was coaching Bournemouth, Eddie Howe scaled up the brilliance he did at Bournemouth at Newcastle. But what exactly has Eddie Howe done that has transformed Newcastle? Let's find out. Togetherness. One of Newcastle's greatest players, Alan Shearer, talked about the departure of the immensely popular coach Rafa Benitez from the club as a shambles. It felt at times that Benitez wasn't happy with the then owner of the club, Mike Ashley, whom Benitez shrugged off as a mere businessman who didn't particularly care for the footballing side of things. After Benitez said these things about Mike, the fans also felt a sense of doom and gloom around the club. After all, Benitez had carried the club from the second tier of English football and taken them to the 10th spot in EPL. The fans were extremely in tune with Benitez. Some of them showed their vocal discontent with Ashley during games. But after Eddie Howe took over, Newcastle fans are in sync with the football the club is playing, with the vision of Eddie Howe, and most of them are even optimistic of getting into top 4 and playing the European game next season. There's a positive energy bursting forth the stadium, something similar to what happened to Liverpool after Klopp took over. Recruitment. We've seen plenty of instances when even the best managers struggle keeping up with the English game if the recruitment isn't good enough. Pep, after an underwhelming first season, was on a shopping spree with regards to fullbacks, and the exit of Jose Mourinho from United has to be partly credited for the club not backing up the manager's wish of signing players like Perisic. So it goes without saying that Eddie Howe couldn't have transformed Newcastle without proper signings. One of the points to note is that Newcastle spent close to $92 million at the January transfer window, and they got players such as Dan Burns from Brighton and Howe Albion, who wins 67% of his tackles and wins 77% of the balls in the air. Besides, there are also players like Kieran Trippier, who had the experience of playing for clubs like Tottenham and also winning the La Liga with Atletico Madrid. Then there's Chris Wood, who has improved Newcastle going forward and contributed to a greater number of goals too. Playing style. With quality players brought in, the style of Newcastle's play has changed too. One of the more difficult things for other teams to do while playing with Newcastle is to win the midfield battle. Newcastle's midfield has evolved into the one where midfielders press a lot when they don't have the ball. Each midfielder averages around 4 tackles per game, making it terrifying for other teams. And if the opposition wants to cut through the midfield by going on the slides, there's Kieran Trippier and Matt Targett. The two have around 12 tackles and interceptions per 90 minutes. Trippier contributed to almost 2 key passes per game and almost 5 progressive passes per game, meaning that Newcastle's attack is mostly through the flanks and not so much through the middle. Awesome background staff. The transformation of Bournemouth under Eddie Howe was nothing but astonishing. He took that team from the bottom reaches of the second division of English football, kept them at the top flight, and kept them fighting for the top 6 position a lot of times. So when investment flooded into Newcastle, they were looking for a manager not simply to guarantee titles and cups in a short period of time, but for a manager who would stick to a club for long, build Newcastle up from the dregs of their glory days, and build a footballing identity. And coupled with that is the fact that there are a lot of wonderful background staff who make Eddie's job good easier. The quarter of assistant Jason Tyndall, first-team coaches Stephen Purchase and Simon Weatherstone, and the sports science man Dan Hodges, which made much of Bournemouth's background coaching staff, have all come together. The time that Howe spent at Bournemouth, along with these staff, was full of verve and spirit, and that their camaraderie transmutes along with the players is something that is self-evident. How are they likely to evolve in the future? While it is too early to say that Newcastle will become a Premier League giant soon, their evolution under Howe is truly remarkable. Their playing style has changed, with teams like City finding it difficult to get past them. Beating Tottenham at their own turf, stopping a formidable home side of Manchester United at Old Trafford, there's plenty of excitement as to what other things Eddie can do at Newcastle. If they secure a Champions League spot the next season, then it will lure other great players into playing for Howe. And if they show promise like Manchester City did after Abu Dhabi United took over, or how Chelsea promised to look after Roman Abramovich, we never know if Eddie Howe can take Newcastle to the heights of these two clubs.